going live. We're live. Hey. So,
hello. Hello and welcome to our very first Three Ravens book club. This is our live stream for our April to May book, which we have chosen Song of the Huntress by Lucy Holland. Very beautiful copy we've got there.
Nice one.
Yeah, we managed to pick up a particularly nice one with gold on the cover. I really like books when they have gold on the cover. I'm naturally drawn to them. If I go into a bookshop and there's gold on it, I want it.
I like the
Basically, I've read a lot of substandard books because of that.
Yeah,
just based on the gold. But my bookshelf looks great.
It's one of the things that Eleanor looks for in a book. Yeah. When she goes into a bookshop, that's how she starts building her pile that she's going to take away, and then she actually starts to look in the covers.
Does it have enough gold to go clang when I put it down?
So our plan for the book club this evening is that we've got a few questions that we thought we could work through. So we'll throw those out and then, chat about them. So if you put your thoughts into the chat box, then we'll read out responses from people as they come through and chew over them and discuss them ourselves, and hopefully we can get a bit of a conversation going.
And we were hoping that at the end we could use our Ravens rating system, which is something we patented for Three Ravens Film Club. So if you are not familiar with that, we rate a book or a film out of 3 ravens, depending on how much we enjoyed it. So did it gain 3 glossy black ravens or 1 empty nest?
Indeed.
Or somewhere in the middle.
Or somewhere in the middle, yeah. The empty nest being 0, 3 out of 3.
Being
somewhere
the
between.
Tippity top.
There. Okay. So the first question to throw out that we came up with is a very general one, which is, in general, how did you feel about the book? Did you enjoy it or did you not enjoy it? So slam your thoughts into the chat box and we will discuss them as they come up.
Martin, did you enjoy the book?
Not as much as I thought I was going to. That's the truth. I thought the pitch for the book and the blurbs and the descriptions and the reviews online, they all sounded amazing. And I was really excited about it. And I love the wild hunt and I love the period that it's set in. But I have to say that actually reading the book, I started with great gusto and energy. And then I found myself falling into a bit of a slog with it. How about you? What did you think?
Again, I was a little disappointed by the book compared to my expectations. I was very excited to read a novel set in this period of history because if you know my interests from the podcast, there's a lot of Anglo-Saxon history and a lot of Civil War as well. So I was really excited to read something set in the Heptarchy with a little bit more Saxon history. And to an extent, I did get that. But I didn't love it quite as much as I had hoped to, I must say. I had high hopes, which weren't quite met.
And there are quite a lot of ingredients in the mix to like, aren't there, in the book?
Yes.
Some things that are big tick box things for both of us, because one of the things we're always interested to encounter in fiction is a queer relationship between women.
Yes,
which is a rare
thing
to encounter, it feels like, particularly in fantasy books, but actually just in general, to see a romance between 2 women. So that was something that we were excited about. Early dog action.
Yes, always a big thumbs up from me when there's a dog, a consistent dog that runs right the way through.
And then, of course, I'm always interested to encounter a magic system to see how that plays out. Always interested to meet a cast of characters and find out what the dark and hidden corners of them are, and to get a sense of their strangeness and their peculiarities and their uniqueness. And when the book started, all of these things felt like things that could grow and emerge.
I think one of the book's strengths is the sort of mystery element to the story. There's parts of it which unfold a little bit like a crime novel.
Yeah.
A lot of characters trying to work out what's going on, either with the strange magical happenings within the town, or what are the motivations of some of the other characters, who is Hurler, where does she come from, what does she want, etc. And also they're trying to figure out their own feelings along the way. And I do think the plot as an overall thing, is probably the book's strength. It's just some of the delivery of the plot perhaps fell down a little bit for me.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you there. And I think that the plot does have a lot of moving pieces, actually. If you were to try and track it all out, it's actually quite an ambitious book in what it's trying to
whenever you receive a book with a cast list at the front, okay, I'm going to have a lot of ducks to keep in a row.
Yeah. But I think one of my complaints about the book would be that there's actually this deep cast, many of whom don't really have storyline arcs.
Yes, and I did find myself referring to the cast list, at least a lot at the beginning when the king was in the Witan, for example, and there were lots of men with names, but no descriptions, so I had no kind of visual to distinguish the men with names.
and that actually, the key thing that you hit upon there was the idea of description. And I think that one of the things the book doesn't do as well as I might have hoped it would is its imagery. I think there's lots of incidents where I don't really know what people look like. I don't really know what they're wearing. I don't really know where they are. There isn't a sense of the world being painted for me, which isn't necessary in a book. Like, it's not a requirement, but I did feel a little bit lost sometimes. And there were like scenes in the book where suddenly other characters, you learned they were there, and they must have been there the whole time. And I was like, oh, you're here as well. Oh, and sometimes a whole crowd of people.
Men with names.
Yeah, men with names, yeah.
I found the passage of time within the book a little confusing also. Time suddenly seemed to move very quickly, and we didn't necessarily see what our characters were up to within that time. So it was Lunasa, and then 5 minutes later it was Samhain, and you think, hang on, where did half the year go?
Yeah,
what happened there?
And what's happened in that time?
Yeah, what's happened in that time? Because actually it felt to me like the action of the book takes place over quite a short period, but we're clearly meant to think that there are 6 months that passed.
Yeah, definitely.
From Manas to Samhain. Anyway.
So just seeing comments in the box.
I'll just put my glasses on. I can't see.
Just here silently agreeing with you on everything.
Excellent.
Encouraging.
It was good to be agreed with.
So yeah, if anyone has any thoughts, we're talking just in general about the book and how you felt about it. And I guess the big question is, did you enjoy it or not? And we said that
overall takeaway.
At the end of the chat, we'll do the Ravens rating between An Empty Nest and 3 out of 3. But I think on the whole, I spent a lot of the book wishing for some things to happen that weren't, I don't know, I felt like they were never quite
gonna happen,
never gonna quite manifest themselves. And it's this sense of there's so much potential in the raw material of the book that it just never bloomed, never quite made it to the front. And sometimes where we were denied things that I really wanted to see. I mean, one of the big ones, of course, is the culmination of this romance and the sex scene, right?
I was a bit disappointed. Martin knows I love reading a book with a queer relationship between two women. I feel like they do exist, but they're fewer and further between, particularly in top 10 book lists and the kinds of things we get fed by our algorithms. I see a bit more male queer literature than I do. So I was pretty excited. It was like, great, Saxons, period of history I'm really interested in, and genre I'm interested in, and it felt a little bit wasted. The sex scene that never was. There was a ... wasn't there?
It was like
I was so disappointed. It was heated kisses and then a page break and they wake up.
It's like the 1980s action movie sex scene where like you pan to some curtains or something. You're like,
pan to a meat hall.
But we were gonna I mean, we've been waiting long enough. Surely we can have a little bit of whatever.
And actually, it's a shame because I think one of the things Lucy Holland did really well was write the tension between these characters. You know, she describes the way they're feeling when they're looking at each other, these really intense moments. Like as soon as they touch, there's this incredible chemistry. And then it was just hidden curtains.
It was. And then didn't come back again. You know, there was still some kissing and some electric touches.
Electric touches.
Quite
Always love an electric touch.
Quite a
in
few
book.
electric touches and kissings and tawny hair.
Much tawny hair.
So much tawny hair.
I mean, if that's the description we're to take away, tawny hair.
Tawny hair crops up a lot in this book. So yeah, in general, I think those are like my top line reflections. Okay, I'll go in here.
Sam's not read the book yet.
Oh, okay.
Well, we'll be interested to hear what you think when you do, because one of the things I was wondering was how people got into the book. Like, was it an easy read for you? Because I didn't find it to be an easy read.
Yeah.
And I read a lot. I read a lot of books across genres, all kinds of things. And normally when I pick up a book like this, I expect to be able to eat it up in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, 400 pages is a reasonable length book, but I'm a quick reader, so I would expect to get through this actually a lot quicker than I did get through this. This took me time.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I mean, we talked quite a lot about it, about why that was. And we tried to put our finger on it. And I reckon it's not one thing. I reckon there's quite a few different factors going on. But I think one of the things that ironically made it slow down for me, or that made it feel quite gradual, was the present tense. Because the book is written in the present tense. So everything's happening now.
Which is really interesting, because I have always associated present tense writing with immediacy.
Yeah.
And feeling like you're in the moment and it's happening with you for real. But I didn't get this from Song of the Huntress.
No. And I think that if everything's happening now, and there's pages and pages and pages of now, that urgency, it feels like it's almost always dialed up. And so everything gets dialed down.
And then it makes it more confusing with things like the passage of time.
Yeah.
When you're having immediacy, but 6 months have passed.
Yeah. And also there's a lot of the book where she's doing like cutback mentions of things that have happened, like exposition dumps, where you're like, well, this is why people tell stories very often in the past tense, because then it isn't so jarring to move from the now to the what was to the past. So yeah, I think the tense was one thing that kind of stressed me out a little bit. And then I think the other one was just the sheer amount of dialogue.
Yes, there was an awful lot of talking, wasn't there? Which normally feels like it is quite pacey when there's loads of chat, but it didn't so much with this one.
I think that's true. I think there's also bits where people are saying things out loud where you're like, would you really say that? And also some of the things that are said in moments, like, if you haven't got to the end, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but the climactic battle at the end, where there's this like scary monster white like wading through the fight, and it's talking to them and they're talking to it in the middle of a fight. And you're like,
yes, you can say, sorry, can we just sit and have a chat about how we're going to stab each other?
We're all trying to kill each other here. I'm not sure that we'd be reflecting on, you know, ironies of magical weapons or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yes. So yeah, I found that a little bit like, one of the things that I struggle with was just the voices, who's speaking, and that kind of rubbing up against the way that she likes to use weird old-fashioned names for things like counties and locations, towns and stuff like that, which is all good. I'm like down for a bit of silly fantasy naming. I do it myself and enjoy it.
Real historical naming, you know. We know that Sherborne would have been spelt like that, for example.
Definitely. But then if your characters don't speak in an oldie worldy dialect as well, they speak using very modern parlance.
There was a tiny bit at the beginning, but it fizzled out towards the end of the book. There was a few instances of people saying, oh, good evening to each other instead of good evening. But that went, didn't it? It was near the beginning and then it sort of faded away.
And I think that's one of the challenges, actually, of trying to write a book that is set in the past. Which actually leads us on to an important question. I wanted to ask you guys about the feelings you had about the folkiness of the book, about the way it handled history, and also about the magic within the book. I think these are like three things I'm always interested to see. Like, what is the history of this world and what's going on inside it. How folky does it feel, particularly if it's a book that presents itself as folky? It's about the wild hunt, so it's got to be about folklore. How's it using that folklore? And then what's going on with the magic system? I think that,
I'm very interested to hear thoughts on those things.
Like a good magic system can really make a fantasy book, can't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, please pop thoughts into the box if you've got any reflections on those things. I mean, if we start with folkiness, just from your perspective, Eleanor, like, how do you feel about how folklore is handled in the book? Like, what is the Wild Hunt story in your mind, anyway?
I think it's handled confusingly, actually. Like I said, just in the first few pages, when the King of Amwyn just lies.
Yeah.
Doesn't try to trick her. There's no double meaning to his words, no subtle misunderstanding. That's against the rules.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's a very lightly drawn character. He only appears in the book about 3 times, doesn't he? Maybe he pops up a 4th time. Not enough times, really. But yeah, he just tells her a lie.
Yeah.
And that's that, really.
And I think within that, Paco, what you've said about the other world is one of the things that I found confusing about the book, because what does the other world, and Anan as the king, this all-powerful character in mythology, what's his agenda towards the world of men? And I feel like it's quite confused.
Yes, I mean, the whole idea is he doesn't want to lead the wild hunt.
Yes.
So he needs some schmuck to do it for him.
Yeah.
Delegates out to Herla without asking for permission.
But then beyond that, there are these engagements between the other world and the human world.
Yes, various figures which appear most of in the final battle who are not really described or given any sort of agency or story.
No. And the character Olwen, the secret spy.
I was frustrated by Olwen because I really wanted to like that character being included. As soon as she rocks up as Ethelberg's maid, she's suspicious. There's going to be something going on with her. But then what ultimately does go on with her is so lightly drawn. She has that one scene with Ingild where you see she's manipulating him in some way. And then that one scene with the bloody crow found in the laundry chest where she sort of goes, yeah, it was me. And then we don't really see her again, do we? She does some kind of white puppetry in the little battle.
Yeah,
that's about it.
That's kind of it. And that made me feel confused, because in my head, the wild hunt in folklore is either a seasonal thing that happens, like thunderstorms and Odin's riding, like that's a famous thing from particularly Norse folklore. The wild hunt appears in the sky almost as a bad omen, and there's an omen aspect to the wild hunt where it's signaling something. But often it's because of a transgression or a warning. So like a monarch is going to die, there's upheaval in the kingdom, something dreadful is coming, and it sort of serves as a premonition.
And to be fair, there is upheaval in the kingdom.
Yes.
That is happening. So I suppose there's that angle.
Yeah, it's maybe there, but it's in the most general sense, because when you hear about Herla's experiences of leading the wild hunt, it's quite ambiguous what they've been up to for centuries.
Yes, gathering souls.
Gathering souls, harvesting
Riding
souls,
around.
We hear. Okay, that's kind of a Valkyrie's job, but all right, let's.
And there is a kind of Valkyrie element because they're an all-female wild hunt. To more or less success. I mean, her best friend is a nicely drawn character, but the rest of them kind of the chorus of wild hunters, aren't they?
And I feel like, team ups are a famous part of like fantasy fiction, right, and sci-fi as well. Yes. Building the team, having the team all having like the party, I guess, in Dungeons and Dragons terms. Like, what are all of our specialisms? What are all of our skills? Are we all going to get a moment to shine, do our thing that we're really good at? I don't feel like she really gives us that.
I mean, I suppose it's the final battle, isn't it? Because you've got Ethelberg chopping heads off because that's her special skill. Yeah. You've got Herla trying to deal with White's lost souls because that's kind of what she's been doing. You've got Ine trying to do the land magic.
Yeah.
Although, what does he actually really do with it in that battle?
Well, he's got like he's got magic gold that comes out the ground. It seems like, or golden light. It's described as. I mean, it would have been so much cooler if he was actually able to summon gold out of the earth and use it as a weapon. Do you know,
or get the forest moving, because his magic, his heritage, the Dumnonian heritage, is linked to the land. So it'd be nice if he could sort of use nature, literally uproot trees. There's that one bit where he's kind of badass in the town, and he just builds a wall out of the ground to prevent the attackers getting through to the Britons, and that's really cool.
But I wanted
didn't do any more of that though.
To like command an army of deer, or like send in a battle badger. Do you know what I mean?
A battle badger.
Yeah. Armor up some badgers and send them into fight.
Like quite a different book.
Yeah, but I think that, you know, it's a bit more maybe out there, but it would be imaginative and unique and really novel, and would make you like sit back and go, whoa, how cool. Whereas instead it's a general like, and the ground glowed gold, and then all the baddies were dead.
Good way to kill baddies. Excess of gold. It confuses them.
All right. Okay. So yeah, I felt like the folklore was there in the background, but I think the volume was turned down on it, and I think it was quite confused. I think the magic was quite unclear. I have real issues with like, what is the Fairy King's agenda?
Yes.
What does he want to achieve in the world of men?
Why is he sending out Olwen and his other buddies to kind of resurrect whites and sow unrest? What is he doing that for?
Yeah. Is he trying to protect like entryways into his kingdom? Is he trying to protect sacred sites? It's not there.
Does he dislike the rise of Christianity in Anglia? Who knows?
Yeah, right. And that's one of the other themes that's in the book, where it's like, oh, well, the priests are broadly speaking bad, but we broadly speaking need to pretend that we're Christians. Yes,
it was interesting that there was nobody particularly pro-Christian apart from the monk. Winter? What's his name? Winfred. Yeah, Winfred, who rocks up, and he's kind of this positive representation of Christianity, because he says, you know, I respect the old ways as well as being a Christian, and he's described as this saint-like figure with beautiful curly hair that the light touches. Great description of him.
Yeah. But you know, there's no Friar Tuck in the book. Like,
well, we've got Emrys, haven't we? The enigmatic Scot who rocks up to deliver not very useful advice to the king every so often.
But what I mean is the like happy warrior. Do you know what I mean? The Christian who's like taking his version of Christianity, taking the learning that's useful to him and his people and applying it. Like at this point in time, Christianity was obviously so increasingly important to people because it was the means of getting an education, the means of becoming wise. Also, charity was starting to be focused around church administration, feeding the poor, managing those seasonal festivals, the tension between the old ways and the new. Like, in a way, I feel like the characters you've got as your two primary female protagonists, they kind of represent one, a modern woman, one, a past and wild woman. And the tension between the two of them could be the tension of the book, the tension between wildness and sophistication.
And yet they're actually quite similar women. I mean, that's one of the reasons they're drawn to each other. They have similar interests. They both kind of defied expectations, become warriors, not stayed at home with the weaving, which is very much derided. Sort of got Ethelberg bringing that down when the women sit around and weave and gossip. She doesn't want to be a part of that.
So I don't know. I feel like the history bit, some interesting like takes, but certainly wasn't convincing.
No, although in many ways fairly accurate. I mean, Ine and Ethelberg were real characters. They were the real king and queen of Wessex, and much of the actual plot-related events did happen to them, and there's absolutely nothing to suggest that Ine was anything except a Christian king.
Yes.
Like, he was really good at spreading Christianity in Wessex at the time, and was a very educated person who was responsible for establishing a code of laws.
Yep.
I actually had to look up what happened to him because I wanted to know. I was interested in what happened to him next, and found out that he and Ethelberg both moved to Rome after the events of the book.
Well, he abdicated, didn't he?
He abdicated, yeah. And they didn't have any children, which was accurate to
fits for the book.
Fits for the book. So they elected, I think it's Ethelthred or Ethelfred, to be the king afterwards. But they both moved to Rome and died there. We don't know much about them.
Did conquer Sussex.
Yeah, he was. He harried us here in Sussex at one point.
So there was a sense of a campaigning warrior king in him, in the history. And I know the book is set in the Southwest, and I think that's because that's where Lucy Holland lives, and that's what she's interested in. And right there on the cover is obviously Glastonbury Tor.
And I do get the sense that she really knows her stuff in terms of Saxon history in the area. That's a strength, and I think she's obviously done a lot of research. I haven't read her other book, Sister Song, which I believe is something of a companion to this. I don't think it's a direct prequel, but I think you do meet some of the characters.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's possible that we just missed some of the initial character establishment, because that may have been in the other book.
Oh, that's curious to know. I mean, it's certainly not billed as a sequel.
No, and I don't. It's not the same characters, but I think there are some people that
some
you will meet
connecting
again.
tissue.
I'm imagining that's the other world characters. Maybe Emrys, who's the kind of time traveling. Are they Odin? Are they Jesus? Are they just the storyteller, the narrator insert? Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But it's all a bit too ambiguous in a way. And actually, it kind of leads on to the next question. So far, if you've recently joined the chat, in general, what did you think about the book? How do you feel about it? Did you enjoy it or not? We talked about that. Then it was about the folkiness, the history, and the magic in the book. How do you think they're represented? Here's a big question that we both ended up kind of sucking on. Who do you think this book is for?
Yeah, who's the target audience?
This for? Because when I started reading it, I was like, is this a YA book? Is it written for like teens? Because it starts off in that way that feels quite innocent and sweet. I mean, it's got fights in it and stuff.
Thinks teenagers.
Yeah, you think it's for teenagers. That's interesting.
I am not sure about that, and I was thinking about it all day, because I was actually semi-expecting it to be a YA or at least new adult book, but I wasn't sure. I think the emphasis on history and politics, actually, and the kind of conflict between church and state, there's a lot going on there. And I'm not sure a teenage audience would be necessarily gripped by all of that in the same way they might be by something that's a little bit more on level. Like The Hunger Games, I would think of as a teen book.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a sort of older teen, isn't it? Young adult. And while that certainly has a degree of politicking and critique of authoritarian regimes, I don't think they're quite in the same level tonally.
No. Well, I mean, the classic feature of a book for teenagers is that Bildungsroman story, right? Where it's about a person going from teenager to adult and the moral lessons they learn along the way.
And all of our characters are in the middle of their lives. Well, for her, she died in the middle of her life, but it's a long life. But even so, Ethelberg and Ina are both grown-ups in a relationship.
You get the sense they're maybe in their late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah, which for the Saxons was the middle of your life.
Yeah, that was the middle of your
Especially
life.
if you're going into battle all the time, then it could be the end of your life.
Yeah, definitely. So I think in a way, one of the things that it missed to be a YA book is that sense of discovery and youth and like growing up and learning and being tricked by adults and those that's not in the book. Instead, it's about actually a load of adults in various states of conflict. How deep the risk level is, that was one of the things that I found not very adult, if you know what I mean, because actually it feels reasonably calm. I know that some people are going to die, but you're never really given that deep attachment
no, that's true,
to people, so it's not like you feel the pain and wound of loss.
Absolutely. I think this morning I was coming down on the side of, I think it's a historical fiction.
Yeah.
And I still think that.
Mm.
That's my. You disagreed with me, didn't you? Because you said the inclusion of the magic and the other world meant that it's more in the line of fantasy and like adult fantasy than.
Yeah, I think it's a fantasy book. I mean, I think that most historical fiction is in effect a form of a fantasy book.
Well, it has to be, doesn't it?
Yeah. So maybe the author didn't realize it. Maybe it wasn't her intention to write a YA novel, but it's too unsophisticated as a book to satisfy adult readers. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I don't.
It doesn't have that slightly deeper romance sex scenes that you might expect from new adult, for example.
Yeah.
I've read quite a lot in that genre, and they're usually pretty steamy.
Yeah, but I'd also say, like, books, any story, any art form really benefits from subtext. Like, what is going on that's hidden that you as a reader or a viewer or a listener can take some guesses at, and that creates tension, doesn't it, where you're like, I'm not certain this is the case, but it seems to me that under the surface this character has this going on, or this character has this going on. And I don't feel like the characters in this book, without wanting to be too mean about it, but I just don't think they have that many things going on beneath the surface. I think you learn because they say it out loud all the time.
I think about I mean, we get slightly teased, don't we, with Inner? Like, what is his big secret? I spent the entire book thinking he was gay.
Yeah.
Turned out he was asexual, which was fine. But like, his big secret was, that was it. And it was teased the whole way through. And actually, I mean, that's one example of how I'm not sure there were enough twists. Nobody was secretly evil. We know from the beginning that Ingild is not a good brother. And maybe possibly has designs on the crown of Wessex. Like, that's never really in question.
No.
I didn't think for even a second that anybody else murdered the old king. Like, I knew it was Ingild.
I mean, you do have Olwen, right? This character who's secretly somebody else.
But she's so suspicious right from the beginning.
Yeah.
It's never really a big surprise that she rocks up.
Yeah.
So I think I could have done with a bit more of a twist, a sort of shocking moment, which I think we were denied.
Yeah. Herla and Inna have the same exact voice. They're the same character with different backgrounds. I think that's
a really fair assertion, isn't it?
Really fair, and I think it is one of the problems of the book. Like, I would have liked there to be depth and difference between these two women. So rather than it being,
well, Puck saying Inna, the king, as well, has the same.
Yeah, that's
voice
true.
As Herla.
You're absolutely right. There's no difference between even those characters. Yeah, that's true. I mean, the three protagonists, in a way, there isn't that much going on between them, as in key differences.
And I wonder if that would have been less obvious if she'd gone for third person omniscience, because then obviously there is one voice, and we're told what they think and feel.
But how a character or the characters talk in a book, whether it's a comic book or whether it's a novel, or even if it's a film or something else, some people don't say everything they feel out loud.
Whereas some people are chatterboxes and very voluble. Some
people are shy. Some people are confident. Some people are overconfident. And that range of personalities isn't very evident. And also in the style of speech, I wanted Herla to speak like she was 300 years older than the others. And for her frame of references, her jokes to be about things that...
I also wanted more, time travel when she disguises herself as Alfrun and goes into the town for the first time. She's looking around going, oh, it's so nice to be back with people. But she's not going, what's that tool? I've never seen that before. Wow, people dress weird now. You know, there was no real sense of that. Like, she managed to shift herself a perfectly fitting fashion item that didn't look weird to anybody and just go and get a job in a stable as if that wouldn't be completely different.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? I think that it goes back to the history bit that we were talking about before. So yeah, when I think who's the book for, I think I don't think teenagers are going to read it and go like, yeah, I really connect with this. I'm vibing with it.
I think they'll struggle.
That heightened emotional sense of being a teenager, and also the issues of being a teenager.
Yeah, you want representation, don't you, when you read a book? I mean, not absolutely dead on accurate representation, but you kind of want to find yourself somewhere, even if it's just in a feeling.
Yeah.
And I think most teenagers might struggle to identify with Ethelberg, who's our sort of one protagonist, isn't she? I mean, sure, she's got this difficult relationship where they don't communicate about the important things. I guess that's something that's identifiable with. She's also that kind of fish out of water. She feels like she doesn't fit in with the other people around her. She doesn't really have any friends. She's lonely. So I suppose there are those aspects which teenagers might find
maybe
relatable.
But I think they're more issues for people in their 20s and early 30s that are being articulated in a not necessarily terribly sophisticated way, basically. Thinking about genre, right? We talked about it a little bit. Is it a historical novel? Is it a fantasy book? Like, we found it quite difficult to categorize. So how would you categorize the book? What genre do you think it belongs to? Because I suppose it...
Yeah, where is it in the bookshop?
Yeah, because it also...
We ordered ours online, so I don't know.
It also bills itself a little bit as a romance novel.
Yes.
Certainly that cover
yes
suggests kissing babes.
And there is a romance plot to this novel, but it's not a pure romance novel in any sense.
No.
I mean, sure, there's a little bit of steamy sword fighting. It's not really a meet cute if you're in the middle of battle, I guess.
No.
But it's there, I suppose. But then I think it misses on a number of the notes that romance requires, including a happy ending for the romantic pairing.
Yep. I mean, I thought the end was curious, like the epilogue, where it seems to be like dangling for a sequel.
Yes.
You're like,
and it could in a way.
But really? Like, I'm not sure that this relationship between these two women was so profound that they're going to fight through the mortal world or the immortal world to get back to one another. I mean,
it seems a lot of the way Herla feels is her actually being awake at last and working her way through her feelings about Boudica rather than about Ethelberg herself.
And I'll be honest, when she was dead, I was absolutely convinced that it was going to be, I've been waiting for you, babes. And there would be Boudica. And they'd get together in the afterlife?
Yeah, where was Boudica in the afterlife?
But there's no...
It's just a best friend.
Even when she rocks up in the afterlife, she was like, yeah, she reminded me of Boudica, that woman.
Oh, well.
Oh, well, now here I am.
I'm going to hang out with my friend who probably isn't in love with me, but doesn't look like Boudica, so who cares?
Well, she talks to what we presume is her horse that the epilogue seems to suggest they had some deep relationship with, where that's not in the book before.
So much so that I actually thought that the horse was the dog.
And what happens to the dog?
What happens to the dog? This dog that sort of occasionally rocks up, and is it bad? Is it good? Is it helping her? Is it hindering her? Is it reporting back to the king of the underworld?
Where is the dog? Yeah.
Trying not to write a Mills and Boon novel, but writing a Mills and Boon novel. Oh, if only Mills and Boon had done a Saxon section.
You would have been into that,
well,
wouldn't
because Mills and Boon have different categories, don't they? There's sort of the medical, the horse riding, and probably others. I'm not an expert. But, there could have been a whole, Saxon sword fighting.
Yeah. I think that in terms of genre, it's really hard to classify, and maybe she's done it deliberately to defy genre, which is got I respect it, but what that then leaves you with as analytical literature people is we end up reading the book and going, so why is she not gone with the genre tropes? What's the point she's trying to make by bucking genre and twisting genre? And I can't figure it out. I can't figure out why she's not written more of a fantasy book if she's going to write a fantasy book. Why she hasn't written more of a historical novel if it's a historical novel. And why she hasn't written more of a romance if it's a romance.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Kind of falls between stools rather than claiming territory and using genre to its effect. Okay, So I feel like we've been quite mean about it, but hey ho.
We have, so maybe we can talk about something positive.
So let's be positive.
There's always something good to say about it, isn't there?
So next question: who was your favourite character and why? So looking for general character reflections. Who was the most interesting character in the book? And we can link that to another question, which was, what was your favourite scene or part of the book and why? So favourite character, favourite scene, why? So please put thoughts into the chat box. I mean, how about you? Who was your favourite character?
My favourite character was Inna, the king, which I felt really bad about because, I mean, look at the cover of this book.
Yeah.
I picked up a queer Saxon book and my favourite character was the man who's the third wheel in the relationship, but he was my favorite character.
Yeah.
I was interested in his internal conflict between trying to follow the Christian religion and having all of these weird happenings going on because he's the heir to Dumnonia and doesn't realize. I like the trope of a non-warrior king in a warrior man society. So I was kind of on side with him then, someone who's a little bit more sensitive, but prone to listen. But I liked it when his kind of baser edges, I guess, or the land burst out of him. So there's a scene when he saw the Witan and he was gripping the table so tightly that he burned his fingerprints into it. And then he had to keep his hands on the table so nobody would notice. And I quite like that with him. I also thought the scene with him and Geraint of Dumnonia right at the beginning of the book was really powerful because you just get the sense, okay, these guys are enemies and they know that their people want them to be enemies and have a big fight, but actually they've got this sense of an understanding between them. They're able to have a dialogue and they kind of rise above it. So I enjoyed that little bit of secret politicking right before Geraint gets skewered. Yeah.
I think for me, the character that in principle I find most interesting is Herla. Because if you think about the situation she's in, she's lost the love of her life in Boudica. She's learned what's happened to Boudica subsequently. So she has quite a lot of trauma there. She's put into this confusing situation where she's endlessly doing this wild hunt nightmare. And then she's thrust into this new set of conflicts, which is actually all quite rich. So I feel like she should be my favorite character. I just don't feel like what was done with her made her interesting enough, I guess. In terms of my favorite bit of the book, the point I was most excited by was the final conflict, right? The big fight at the end where I'm like, oh, it looks like, you know, Herla, the immortal. Because that's the other thing. If you're an immortal and the only danger to you is like Fey weapons, then, you know, there should be more danger from Fey weapons in the world.
What happens? Can your hand get chopped off by a Fey weapon? Yes, because there's the knife, isn't there? The bone knife. And we're just told that Inna's just broken it. just
that's just it. But like, I mean, I wanted there to be a team of baddies from the Fey realm in the world.
And we know they were there because they popped up in the final battle. It's like, oh, there's the three brothers, there's Olwen, and there's this guy, and they had never appeared before.
And where was their plot? Like, you know, a scheming set of witches or whatever else is going on to like manipulate and to try and take down this immortal warrior who's so dangerous, using the only things that can take down an immortal warrior.
There were also maybe a few too many characters because there were characters who fulfilled the same role. So we've got the Emrys, the Scop character, but also in that role of the kind of wise outside of the society giving the advice, we've got Inna's sister Quembra, who's a nun, and we also get the sense she's like him. She's not interested in sex. She's kind of outside, but she also has these far-seeing eyes. And then you've got what's her name? Kifka or Kigfa? She's like a little teenage witch in Dumnonia. She just sits by the fire and gives some wise advice. Like, these people are all kind of aspects of the same people. Maybe that's what they're supposed to be.
Well, maybe they're all
just
supposed
occurred
to
to
be
me.
like
maybe they're all like the three-headed god, the three-eyed raven, Odin, etc. Possible reading there. Don't know. I've just pulled that one out of the air.
I think you're doing harder work than Lucy Holland. I don't think that she's I mean, maybe she has, but if she has crafted that consciously, then she hasn't done it in such an ambiguous way that you know, you'd stumble on that interpretation rather than being able to, you know, come up with it. But people with master's degrees in English literature, do you know what I mean?
Hako says, I remember Geraint fondly. He knew what he wanted to do and how to achieve it.
Yeah.
I also thought he was a great character.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a shame.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shame.
In terms of favourite scene for me, I think it was the one I briefly mentioned, the conflict with the Britons when they turn up in, oh God, what town is it? Is it Sherborne, actually?
I think it is.
When
yeah.
Inna and Cadwy turn up. And the army's there to meet them, and they have the rock wall and the lightning which strikes Lefric and breaks his legs when they've tried to kill Cadwy. I think that was probably the most exciting bit for me.
It's funny though when these places are coming up, and I'm like, oh yeah, Sherborne. That's where my uncle lives.
Yeah.
I was like,
you weren't able to
site of the epic
get
battle
into
at
it.
Sherborne. It's more like, go and see my great uncle. Would you like a digestive biscuit?
They did cover ground though, because Ethelbert ended up in Southampton in the end, which is not near Sherborne at all. So very impressive. I mean, I suppose she did borrow Hella's horse, but some serious riding going on there.
And yeah, I think I was so excited in the final battle because I thought there might be a reunion with Boudica. I thought there would be a bit more of a revelation with Annan about like what's going on. None of it. So yeah, I was excited until I wasn't, and I felt a bit let down come the conclusion. I felt like it tied together. Okay. We've sort of addressed this one, but let's hear your thoughts. Did you find the writer's style easy to read? Did you think it was right for the story?
Yeah, we just sort of covered that, didn't
We've
we?
sort of covered it, but I would be interested to hear other people's opinions. And don't be shy about like putting your thoughts down. How about the style it was written in? Because I'll repeat it. I do not think that the kind of present tense suited it. I think it should have had a sense of being narrated by a storyteller who
maybe
was telling us
Emrys, the storyteller. And actually, the title of the book, Song of the Huntress, gives us the notion that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because there's a big song, sort of scald performance, or scop as they call it in this section in the beginning of the book, where we see Emrys get up on the table and they tell this amazing saga all about Annan and what happened. And that should be the frame, I think, because also then it would place the book quite firmly in the storytelling tradition from that period, which is oral, which is musical. It's called Song of the Huntress.
And that was one of the things I wanted to say.
But we don't get a Song of the
It's
Huntress,
like, where is the Song of the Huntress?
Yeah, who's telling it?
Where is the music in this book? Because actually, I feel like there isn't enough of it at all. We do get a couple of mentions, like you say, of like parties and stuff.
Yeah.
But there isn't a sense of there being a song or Herla's song. Because I think she is the Huntress, right?
Yes.
So theoretically, it's Herla's song. She doesn't sing it. Nobody sings it of her. So is it just a title that sounds cool?
It does sound cool.
It sounds very cool because it totally suckered me in. I was like, oh, cool. Song of the Huntress.
Yeah, but I the more I think about that, the more I think it should be told by a storyteller.
Yeah. So in terms of style, how was it to read? Was it easy to read? Did the present tense thing get in your way as a reader? Because it definitely got in my way. And then all the dialogue breaks, I feel like, got in my way as well. I wanted a little bit more of the inside of the mind of the narrator in the moment, because you're jumping between these three characters, right?
Yes.
And what someone says versus what someone thinks can be quite different. And we very rarely get the Herla was thinking at the time, or I was thinking at the time.
And with the two girls,
I am thinking.
They are presented as straightforward people who speak their minds, so they say what they think. They are like uncomplicated warriors. Within it, I would have liked a bit more. He was almost my special boy.
Yeah, almost a special boy.
He had all of the right ingredients. Just didn't deliver for me on the end.
No, but I mean, do you think it was a solid choice to make them the same? like, what do you think the book would have benefited if these two women had been a bit more distinct?
I would have liked it more, I've got to say, especially because in Saxon parlance, you do see these two types of women, don't you?
Yeah.
You get Shield Maiden, who's like out there on the battlefield, and then you get Peace Weaver, who's at home politicking, basically. I would have liked one of each of those for meeting and falling in love under the guise of a storyteller who tells a story. But you know, just to distinguish them a little bit. And obviously the story wouldn't have been the story if that was the case. If Ethelberg had been a peace weaver who was a little bit more subtle, you know, spinning the women's arts and kind of going in the back door, while Herla was a bit more choppy, kicked down the door.
Yeah.
That I would have liked that because, well, I like reading that kind of relationship, honestly. And when I do read a romance novel, I'm quite into the opposites attract trope.
Yeah, but I think that there's scope then for each to learn something from one another. Right?
Yeah, and you were saying there's not really a moment where you've got your party and everybody gets to use what they're good at.
No.
There needs to be moments of conflict within a story which only one of the characters can solve.
Yeah.
Herla and Ethelberg can kind of solve the same problems because they put the boot in and get the sword out.
Hit the thing
until it dies.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's their solution to
problems. So it would be nice if one of the solutions was actually talking it through.
But I mean, this is the thing. Like Ethel, who, as I call her, like the distinction is she's vulnerable physically because she can be injured.
Yeah.
Herla,
basically fine.
Can do whatever. That's the only real dividing line, I feel. Whereas if you were to encounter somebody in 2024 from 1724, the way that they would think and act and be would be very, very different to how you as a modern person would think and act and be. And so there isn't that sense of them having culture clash or even learning about the benefits of it. Because I reckon if we did meet someone from 1724, we might come away from meeting that person and go, do you know what? Maybe there was some good things about the way life was in 1724.
What have I learned from them?
And the person from 1724 would be amazed by
penicillin.
Yeah, innovate refrigeration technology.
Showers.
Yeah, you've been to space. Like all of that kind of stuff. So, but I think
women have the what now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that the book just basically sandwiches time it's like 300 years have passed and everyone behaves and speaks in the same way. Nothing is different now.
I mean, they say, you've got an English accent at some point to
Herla,
quite
early, yeah. But I didn't think I thought that was a missed opportunity. And I think that could have been reflected in the writing also. So like Herla's chapters, how she sees the world,
would have been
different poetic, expression compared to Ethelberg, who I think sees things in quite a straightforward and blunt way. And then I also think Ina sees things in quite an artistic and like nature connected way that's slightly sort of outside of the norm of the way of thinking. So why aren't we getting it across those chapters? If it's your voice, why aren't we getting your actual voice, your way of thinking, your way of expressing yourself as distinct? The century skipping is utterly wasted. It is absolutely utterly wasted.
Missed opportunity for some time skip fun.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Another question to throw into the rich gumbo part. What did you think about the plot in general? Did you think the plot was satisfactory? Because one of the things that we said when we were finishing it was, you know what? I think the plot's okay.
Yeah, I said that at the beginning of the chat, didn't I? And I think the plot's got a lot of really good elements to it. Like there are things in that pot which really ought to make a delicious stew.
Yeah.
I think it's possibly just the execution.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it doesn't quite honor those tropes of genre plots, if you know what I mean. It doesn't land in the final act. Like the climax comes very late.
Yes.
Relative to most, like if you think about traditional plots, they have your introduction where you meet all your characters, Then the second act where they get stuck up a tree. Then the sort of climactic bit of the, obviously I'm speaking as a metaphor here, climactic moment where lots of stuff is thrown at them up the tree. Then the fourth act where they figure out how to get down from the tree and escape.
The fifth act when they get down from the tree.
Yeah, and once they're out from the tree, they feel like they've learned things from their experience of being stuck up the tree.
I thought the structure of the ending was a bit strange, actually.
Yeah.
Because I thought it would have been more powerful for Inna and Ethelbert to have their serious conversation about their marriage and what it means and where's it's going before the final battle.
Yeah.
But instead you've got this like battle, and then okay, we're gonna sit down and talk about our marriage now, which is a weird pacing thing for me.
Yeah.
I think it would have been possibly more powerful if they'd had that conversation and it had been quite emotional. Then there's the battle and one of them's injured, maybe killed.
Yeah. That would be more interesting. I mean, obviously that would be then defying the history of the storyline that she's hung it on.
Yes, it could be injured.
But likewise, Inna being asexual isn't necessarily the most interesting choice.
I mean, it's an explanation for the lack of air. That's I think all the historical evidence there was to suggest that's true.
And maybe it would be a bit more of a cliche or a bit more problematic if he'd been a queer man and been in love with a boy.
They kind of cover that straight away in one of Ethelberg's early chats with Herla when she's pretending to be Elfrin. She's like, oh yeah, I kissed a girl. It was great. I like both. It's cool. Don't know what's going on with my husband. It's cool if he likes men.
Yeah.
And that was that.
And that's kind of that.
There was no real sense of danger, actually, which I suppose is a little refreshing in a queer book. Yeah. Especially a historical one, because normally you've got the, oh no, what if the church find us out? They will burn us as witches, etc.
Quick, kiss me
before they find out. But yeah, so maybe it was refreshing to not have that aspect to it. Was it perfectly realistic? I'm not sure.
I don't think so. I mean, we do know that Saxon women did on occasion have wives, so that is
legit. And Saxon women were a lot more progressive than some of their later counterparts. That's for sure. You know, women were allowed to vote in the Thing or the Witan and have a voice, divorce their husbands if they had a good reason to do so, own their own stuff, so and fight. It wasn't, Ethelbert wasn't totally unusual.
But I also feel like with the culture clash aspect for Herla, that might have, like, why weren't you talking about how things have changed, if you know what I mean? Like the whole thing with Boudica, which I'm going to keep coming back to because it really wound me up, is like I know quite a lot about Boudica, such as there is to know.
Well, we had a good dig into Boudica after our visit to Colchester, didn't we?
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, if you're unfamiliar with Boudica, like a lot of what we think we know about Boudica comes from sources written long after she died.
Or just by the Romans.
Yeah, and by Latin authors who are setting about propaganda. So there are some factual details and pieces of information that we know from archaeological evidence, but there's also a lot of sort of speculation that's made about it. And one of the things about Boudica that's so important is the Romans refused to respect her right to rule after her husband died.
Yes.
So she has a husband, the husband dies, she feels like she should be able to be treated as a king.
And her tribe are fine with that.
Yeah, of course, because that was normal for her culture. Yeah. And part of the reason that she has all this rage is because the Romans refuse to recognize that. Now, that's not in this book. It's hiding a really big, important historical idea. And instead you get this idea of the queerness of Boudica's relationship with Herla. And Boudica's children are one of the most important triggers for Boudica's rage.
And that is also in the book.
Yeah.
They are mentioned.
But yeah, they're mentioned.
It was like, oh, Boudica was actually quite fair and fine until her daughters got targeted by the Romans and then she went crazy.
Yeah, that's right. And so I feel like if that's the base context for Herla, let's talk about some of the Boudica issues in relation to Ethel.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, let's draw the comparisons, because she compares her to her all the time. But they don't seem like one another in any way.
No.
It is. It's frustrating. Okay. we're nearly at the end now, but one thing we wanted to talk about was, did you think the book had clear themes or a message? Because that's one of the things about folklore and folk tales. Very often, clear themes, clear message, and were those themes handled well?
I go, no.
Yeah,
Do
no.
you think it had
no,
clear themes and a
no.
message? Or what do you think the theme or message was?
No, I think that the book sort of suggests it's about self-discovery. And I think one of the reasons that Inne is a more interesting character is by the end he has figured himself out a bit more.
Yeah.
I don't think Ethelberg really figures herself out. She starts the book off not being respected, and by the end of the book, she's more respected.
Yeah, or she realizes that she thinks she's not respected because she's not respected in the Witan and the court, but when she rides out into Wessex, people are like, oh my god, you're the best.
Yeah.
So
but like one of the weird things at the end is that like Herla's like, come with me. Right. I'm dying, so come with me to the next life. And she's like, no.
I got stuff to do.
You pass on, I've got stuff to do. Well, firstly, do you? I'm not sure. I like your schedule's quite clear as far as I can tell at this point in time. But also, if you'd started the book wanting to die,
and then doesn't,
and then by the end had figured out you want to live.
But that's not her at all. She's got this real fierce vitality right from the start. She does want to grab everything, doesn't she? So that's definitely not her.
That never changes.
I suppose it's a sort of general theme of being true to yourself is better. Don't try and hide who you are, because obviously Inna's got this inner land magic, which is having to squash down and breaks many tables because of it. So it could be that it's being true to yourself and accepting all parts of yourself equally, which is for Ethelberg. Obviously, she ends in, because there isn't the traditional romance ending, she ends in an interesting place where she likes women. She's liked women since she was a teenager. She obviously really, really loved Herla, but she's in this relationship with Inne that actually kind of works. They're very good friends. When they communicate, they work super well together. They've kind of got everything going on that a good relationship requires. And she sort of just says, okay, actually, I want to work with this.
Yeah.
And then he does the whole, but it's totally fine if you go and have sex with women.
Yeah.
At the end, which I think is an interesting thing for him to do. But I suppose he's saying, I understand that you're not the same as me.
In a way, you could see the book as a kind of marriage counselling handbook. Basically, sometimes a woman in an unsatisfactory marriage just needs to have a lesbian
Lord
affair.
Of the Wild Hunt.
Needs to have a lesbian affair. And her husband, as long as he's okay with it, come the end, will probably be more happy that she's done it. And that's it. Like, that seems to be the moral of the story. Right? Doesn't it?
So it could be called Ethelberg's trip to Paris.
It could be, though.
I think everyone needs a trip to Paris.
I wonder the extent to which Lucy Holland, she's like, my marriage is unsatisfactory.
Well, I think Lucy Holland, as an author, is she presents a podcast actually.
Yeah, she does. Breaking the Glass Slipper.
She's a feminist writer, and she is interested in presentations of queerness as well. So I think she's definitely on the right side of history.
Yeah.
I just wish she'd gone
her
further with
values
it.
Are cool. I mean, one of the comments. It feels like a first draft, that phase where you've written quite a bit, but must throw away 3/4 of it. Gets rid of some characters and create new ones.
Get rid of some. Please.
I mean, definitely get rid of
some of the
characters.
men in the Witan.
Just define your characters. Like, I don't think that the themes are clearly developed, and I don't think there's a clear moral coming into the story. And in those senses, it ends in a unsatisfactory fashion.
In a way, I actually think this was an excellent choice by our Patreon partner for our first book club book, because it's given us so much to discuss.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you really just love a book, all you go is, everything is perfect and I loved it all. And this has given us a bit more to sink our teeth into in terms of a discussion from loads of different angles as well. Genre, style, history, characters, themes. We've had a lot to say, which is pretty good.
Yeah, and I think that, as we said right at the start, the ingredients are all there in this book. Like, if you were to look at the kitchen cabinet of concepts and themes, you could cook something delicious out of those raw materials. It just doesn't quite end up being the
Ends up being one
banquet.
of those strange stews.
Yeah, one of those things you're
thrown
like,
into
I have not
anything.
done the right things with these ingredients. So yeah. Okay, which brings us to our final point. Let's give the book a Ravens rating. So we're going from 0, i.e. an empty nest, which is you would actively say, this is terrible, don't
Would
read
recommend
it.
as toilet paper.
Yeah, up to 3 ravens out of 3, which is an absolute stone cold classic.
To be remembered for the ages.
To be remembered for the ages and to be actively recommended to anyone who even gives you the slightest inclination that they're looking for a book right now. So where would you put it on the sliding scale between The Empty Nest and 3 out of 3?
I always find it really hard to rate books, and I tend to rate meanly. I'm like the maths teacher who marks over harshly to make you do better when it comes to book club ratings.
The idea of you being a maths teacher, by the way, is hilarious.
I'd be an excellent maths teacher. I don't know what you're talking about.
You have accountancy qualifications.
Still can't count.
But can't count.
So I think are we allowing half ratings?
I think we should just go for good, clean, round
I'm
numbers.
going to say 1 glossy black raven.
Yeah.
Which feels harsh, but fair.
Well, I think giving it 0
would be wrong.
Would be very mean, because I don't think it's toilet paper.
No.
I think
a lot of research has gone into the book.
I think she's tried really hard.
For me, it's a 1.
Yeah, I think it's a 1 for me as well. I don't think you give it a 2, because as we talked about in part of this conversation, and people in the chat have been really clear as well, I'm not sure who this is for. And so I'm not sure who I'd recommend it to.
No, that's very true. I'm not sure it's for you. I'm not sure it's for me.
No, and we're actively interested in books about queer women anyway.
And history and folklore.
And history and folklore. So like all of those things are there. They should be ticking our boxes. But the way that they're rendered and used, not exploited to the point where you're like, oh my God, you've done something so clever and cool. That's not how I expected that to go. That's so exciting. Instead, it's like, okay, all right.
When I compare it to the last queer female book I read, which was the second book in the Tamsin Muir's Gideon the Ninth series,
sure.
There's kind of no contest. I mean, that's a genre-defying sci-fi fantasy, absolute insane wild ride of a series, which I think is incredible and super rich and very challenging intellectually. Book's so great. Big recommendation for that.
Yeah. So that's not Gideon the Ninth, is it? Or,
yeah,
Gideon.
Yeah, that's the first book.
Yeah.
The second one's Harrow the Ninth. There's a few of them.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to get onto a whole new text.
But, so Packy says, I couldn't properly finish it. I had to skim through a big chunk of it. It made me quite angry a few times.
Yeah. So, okay. I think that's fair.
Yeah. So would that be an empty nest?
Is it
almost a 1
Is
raven?
it an empty nest or is it a 1 raven?
Does this become a dance?
Yeah. Goosh, tish, goosh, tish. And anyone else in the chat as well, because we've seen other people who've pitched up and disappeared.
Ooh.
So mysterious silent entries and disappearance.
We may have to give it an average of 1.
Well, I think it is going to be an average of 1. I'd rather not say empty nest, but it might be a bit of a tumbleweed nest. What we'll do is leave an invisible ink asterisk. And then under that, it will be written, but probably an empty nest. But we'll give it 1, shall we?
Yeah, let's give it 1.
Let's give it 1.
I think so.
And I don't reckon Leigh Bardugo is going to let us down.
I really hope not. I've read, I think, all of her novels, actually, and I haven't been disappointed by one yet. So I'm pretty excited. So that's our next book club pick for next month. It's The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo, and is a historical fantasy, I believe, magic realism, all kinds of things going on there. I know that for that particular author, for Leigh Bardugo, it is a new thing for her.
Yeah.
She's not done historical fiction before. She normally sticks to pure fantasy or across different sort of settings, wildly different settings. But so this is going to be interesting,
Yeah,
I think.
I'm really
very
looking forward to
excited.
reading it.
I'm going to start it tonight in bed.
This one, though, charity shop, I reckon. It's not going on the shelf.
It's very beautiful, though, isn't it?
Well, just because it's got gold on, Eleanor.
It
You
gets me
can't-
every time.
Just because it's got gold on doesn't
It
mean
gets me every time.
you should have it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching our first Three Ravens Book Club live stream. Thank you for the contributions made, especially Paco, obviously. And yeah, good luck with the Familiar. I reckon we're going to like it more. I'm going to say that now.
Yeah, let's take a bet. And then let's see if we all come back in a month and think,
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much.
bye.
Bye-bye.